Over to you, Adam. We're very happy to have you, and thank you for being here with us and presenting.
That's great. Thank you for having me, and thank you all in advance for listening to me. I'm going to be here talking about Perthes disease. I'm going to stay away from talking about Perthes disease too much because ultimately, and I've just said this to Loredana, that you guys are the boss. So the purpose of my talk is to talk to you about what research I've been doing. Over the last couple of years, I've just got introduced with Perthes research, and ultimately why more is needed, why we need to do a little bit better than what we're doing and increase what we're doing. So my screen is shared with you guys, so I know that sometimes there's a little bit of a lag with the screen, so if anyone's got any burning questions, I'll answer them as and when we can, but also in the script with the slides. If we're a little behind, please do just give us a shout if you want us to like me to go back to anything. So, like I say, I'm not going to hang around too much on what is Perthes, but I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of it. A condition where the hip bone doesn't grow properly. Now, what we mean about that is during the course of the where the disease is active, the bone doesn't grow properly. What we know is that the blood supply to the end of the big bone in your hip, the top part of your leg, the blood supply is reduced there. And that causes that part of the bone to break down. Now we know that that blood supply does get stopped. We don't know why the blood supply gets stopped, but ultimately that causes a lot of pain and can stop people doing what they want to do. Children will often present to us around between the age of about 4 and 8, and often with a painful hip, limping, unable to do the things that are important to them, and that's where we come in. So, what do we do for Perthes? Now, at the minute, we do a lot for Perthes. I'm a physio, so what we do a lot of stretching, and we do a lot of strengthening. We do a lot of what we call activity modification, so changing the activities that you do, trying to find activities that you can do, keeping you pain-free. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to protect that joint, protect the hip, which is made up of the bone that goes from your leg going into the hip joint. It's that ball and socket, and we're trying to protect that so that we can get you through the disease process and have a nice environment for that joint to stay as well as it can, and what would ultimately be Perthes do the least amount of damage as it can. Now, sometimes it's not possible to do that without surgery, and then you end up with the aftercare of surgery, which can be us helping you to walk again after the surgeons have done their magic. Now, occasionally that also includes the little picture that you can see. That's not just a man doing the splits in some funny underpants. That's one of the braces that are sometimes used to keep, again, the hip in the best position as it can. So already, I've only spoke about 5 things there, and there's so many things that are already happening. So it can be a little bit overwhelming for us as the professionals you go to see in hospitals, so let alone the parents of the children who have to, have all these treatments done. So this is where I came in, and what I've been doing over the last 2 years is starting what I'm calling the Nonstop project. Now, I'd love to be able to take the claim the fame for coming up with this, but this was actually, the name was thought of by a group of children at an advisory group in Alderhay, where I went to talk to them about what I was doing, and we came up with this name. So Nonstop, for non-surgical treatment of Perthes. So talking through the name, it's non-surgical. So I'm not a surgeon, I'm a physio. I see a lot of children who have surgery. I see a lot of children who don't have surgery. But ultimately my impact is done on the non-surgical side of it. And we're looking at the treatment of Perthes disease. So a little bit more about who I am. I'm a children's physiotherapist. I work in Leeds. I've worked just with children now for about 4 years. I worked with adults originally, but then I realised that I needed to work with children because that's where I felt I was best placed. I'm a clinical academic. Now, what those 2 words mean isn't particularly important, but my clinical side is me working in the hospital. And my academic side is where I work with research. So that just splits my role so you understand where I am and where I'm working. And I'm also an NIHR pre-doctoral fellow. Now that you don't have to worry about any of these terms, but ultimately what that means is that I have a relationship with both the hospital and the university. And I'm working on research at a level, a relatively junior level at the minute, with a lot of supervisors and a lot of very clever people who help me along the way. And what I've done so far is working as a physio in my junior rotations. After finishing university, I went and worked in the hospitals for a few years, moving from team to team, learning the ropes in and around the hospital, and then decided that my specialty area should be with children. So that's where I've now got a position at Leeds Children's Hospital. And then I also did some more university work looking at clinical research methods, and that was to make sure that I had a bit of a foundation understanding, some understanding of how to do good research and how to make sure that the research that I did was not just the right research for people in labs and people at universities, so that it meant the most for the patients, because that's what's the most important. So what I've been doing for the last 2 years, I'm just coming to the end of it, is what we've been calling a PCAF, and that's just what we call people who are doing the research before they go on to do a doctoral study. So the 4 big parts of the work that I've been doing is some work on some training courses. I've done quite a few courses to help me get better at things that I needed to know. And all of these things have been working towards me getting better at being able to do research and doing the right type of research, so again, to make sure it's meaningful. The second part of that was to be building a team of supervisors who can help me deliver that research and make sure that I'm sticking to my target. The third part of that has been, after doing these research projects, is to write them up to make sure that I can have something to show everybody, show both the other healthcare professionals that I work with, but also scientists around the country, around the world, if they're interested, and also the patients and the parents of the kids that I am ultimately responsible for delivering this research to, so that I can show you guys that what I'm doing is important, but also that I'm actually doing it as well, and we've got proof for what we're suggesting. Now, the final part of that is my application for a PhD project, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what research I've got proposed for the next few years to try and help us understand Perthes a little bit more about what we should be doing and what's the best thing to be doing. Now, one of the big things that I did do as part of the PCAF that I hadn't mentioned just in the slide before was that I did, and this was the most important thing that I've done over the last 2 years, I'd say, is that I had a really lovely day out on a Saturday where I went to speak to these lovely people in Liverpool. And I took my friend Fred the Skeleton with me, and I showed them what Perthes was, where it affects them, and I asked them about my research project. Now, what I did to them, I spoke for about half an hour, talking to them about what I was interested in, what I was trying to find out, and what I had suggested. Now, if anyone's ever watched the X Factor, where Simon Cowell will see someone who you think, oh, they were really good, and Simon Cowell then rips them apart. This was a tough judge. They were tough cookies. They gave me some good pointers, and that basically my full PhD project has now been shaped based on the advice of these kids. And the youngest person in that room was 6, and they were the person with the biggest ideas for what I should do for my PhD. It was amazing. And they range from 6 to 17, 18-year-olds, giving me hints and tips on how I can make the research more relevant to them. So I'm going to be then tackling the ideas and the things that they think are important rather than what we think are important, because they're the people who it should really matter to. So what did they say? I went to them and suggested a website, and they said that websites were for old people. And they wanted an app. They wanted something they could do on their iPad or their phone, and they wanted to do it where we could make it like a game. Because you can see in the bottom of the slide there that they said that physio is boring. Now, I'm a physio, so I'm not supposed to say this, but I think we know as well. I can admit to you that we know that physio is boring as well. So what we try and do with our kids is we don't make you do 3 lots of 10 exercises 5 times a day, because we know that doesn't work. But what we do is we try and make it like a game, and we try and make it like a game with levels, so that we can progress you and get you better, So if you think about it like levels, this is what we got to talking about again with levels, so that when you get stronger, you go up a level, and when you get better at certain things, you go up a level and it gets better. But we keep it fun, so we keep you engaged. And then we also put things like videos on there, both from physios like myself and other physios working around the country, and also patients, so that people with Perthes can talk to people with Perthes, not just people who talk about Perthes. Because whilst I want to deliver the research and I want to do what I can to help you, you guys are the people who know it, the parents and the patients with Perthes disease, the families who are directly impacted by it. That's who we want to hear from. They're the experts. We're just the people helping it along the way. And then other things like frequently asked questions, other area websites that they can go to and have a look for more information. And then we talked about some of the other fun things that we can do with it, like linking music to your exercises so that you could do it and you can make it a bit more of a game. So thinking back to what I was saying about my PCAF, about the different parts of it. So I'd started to, this is all working towards the application where I'm thinking about what we're going to do, because we know that we need to do more research in it. Then I'm starting to develop a PhD project that would give me some more of the answers to the questions that we needed to ask. So I did some research. I did a couple of things. Now, again, the names of these are not too important, but what you can see right at the bottom, the end result was that we need more research. So I did a case review, which is there on the left, where I looked at a couple of centres across the UK and looked at what they were doing with some of their children who'd been diagnosed with Perthes disease in the first 2 years after diagnosis. Now, in these 5 centres, different people were doing different things. Now, nothing that anyone was doing was for the wrong reasons. Every single child had good treatment. But what we had across those 5 centres was a big variation in what people were doing. So everybody was doing different things, and that shouldn't be the case. We should know what the best thing to do is. I combined that with something called a systematic review, and I think that picture shows it really well, is that I get all of the evidence that's available on what people have done for Perthes from a non-surgical point of view, so not the operations, and I compared all of those pieces of work, and I pulled it together into one small piece of information where we look at which one is best. And both of those things told us that we know that different places are doing different things, and that no one really knows what the best thing to do is when we don't do an operation. So both of those things tell me that we need more research for Perthes. So again, we keep coming back to this, is that then pushes me further towards that PhD application, where we need to do a bigger project and looking at how we manage children with Perthes disease from a non-surgical point of view, which is where we got to the plan of the project. Now, in the project, I've tried to separate it, but I'm working with a big team of incredible supervisors, and we work on 3 parts. So the first part of my project is going to be talking to patients with Perthes. I'm going to include children in that because I want to know what they have to say and what we should be doing. And then to the families that were caring for the children with Perthes disease, I want to know what's not working and what I can do to help with that. And I need to know how we would best do that, how we would be best placed to help that. And what that means is that we need to find out what matters the most to them. Now, physios, and as with the surgeons and other healthcare professionals, you'll very often hear us talking about hip conditions, where we look at the amount of movement at the hip and the amount of strength at the hip. Now, they are really important things for us to know, but what's more important to know is how is it impacting the child with Perthes and the family who's looking after these children with Perthes, because they don't really mind whether they've got an extra 10 degrees of movement at their hip. That's not important. What they want to know is, when can they go play football? When can they go back to gymnastics? When can they go on the trampoline? So that's what we need to find out, and I need to make sure that those questions are the right ones. So the first part of the project will be to talk to the patients and the families to make sure that we're asking the right questions. The second part will be the app. So you can see that it's called the complex intervention. You don't need to worry about that. That's more just the term that it gets called. And that will be designing an app, and it will be an app that will be for you to go away and use in between physio sessions. For for if you're not having surgery, this will be the app that you use, and I need to make sure that that does everything that we want it to do and help support the treatment that the physio is doing. It's not going to be instead of physio. It's going to be good to go alongside it to make physio easier and more fun, and ultimately so that we get more physio done in the hope that it would benefit the child. So to do that, I need to make sure that it's something that they want, which will come from the questions that I'll have asked in the first part of the project. And then we need to make sure that it's something that you actually need. It can't just be something that we want to have. It needs to be something that's worthwhile having and making a meaningful difference. So then we need to work on how we're going to test that. And that's where this part will look at developing it as part of it won't just be patients and families involved in this. It will also be a group of clinicians, so hospital healthcare workers from across the UK. Again, they will give their input onto what the app should include. And then it needs to be something that they'll definitely use. It's okay me saying that I'm going to make this fancy app. It needs to be something that people will definitely use. And for that to happen, we need to test it, and we need to be able to test it regularly. Now, to test it, we need to check to make sure it does what we want it to do. And what we mean by that is that people log on, people actually use it, and people are able to use it, and it's nice and easy. Sometimes when you click on an app, you can't find things, and it doesn't load properly, and it crashes, and it has 1 million updates a week, and they're the apps that get deleted really quickly. So what we'll do is we'll do regular user tests, so where we will get people to use this app at home, and then we'll get them to come in and use it with us and and tell us where the problems are. And if that's okay, then we'll start to think about whether this would be ready and be useful in a trial. Now, when we talk about a trial, in this instance, what it would be is to look at how useful that is from a non-surgical point of view. You would use the app, and it would be to use it in an app in a trial of surgery versus no surgery. And we know that the surgery is dealt with by the surgeon, so that they can deal with whichever surgery they need to do. And then the non-surgical part would be physio with the app. So we've then got a meaningful trial that we can now start to tell what's the best way to manage children with Perthes disease. And that's part of the Ronseal. Now, perhaps the Ronseal might be a little bit. If there's any kids watching, they may be that what's Ronseal. But it was an advert from a few years ago where it said it does exactly what it does on the says on the tin. Now, if this app is designed to help children with Perthes disease ultimately manage their Perthes disease, we need to check that it actually does that. Now, the way that we do that will be to repeat some of the work that we did in the first part of the project, in talking to the patients and the parents and asking, has it worked? Has it made you do your physio more, which is ultimately our aim? Have you engaged more with your physio and done your treatment? And then checking things like, have we maintained a good hip range of movement, hip strength? We may include x-rays to have a look at the joint integrity and looking if that bone has stayed nice and strong, how we want it to be. But that's the sort of thing that I don't know yet what the meaningful things to measure are, because I'm going to work that out as part of the project. So that kind of, all of those pieces of work would hopefully get us to a point where we've got a really good Nonstop. Now, hopefully, if I'm successful in applying for my PhD, we're going to hear me talk about Nonstop, and hopefully all of you guys talk about Nonstop for quite a few years to come until we've got a good Nonstop. And that will mean that we've got a really good non-surgical treatment for Perthes disease. And it's much easier to say. So when I've spoke to people about Perthes before, I'll often come back to relate my project to what Perthes disease is. So in a condition where we know that the hip bone doesn't grow properly, but we don't know why. I'm going to be completely honest in that I don't know how to fix that. So there are lots of work going on with people with brains much bigger than mine to try and fix that and work out how we do that. What I think that I can do is try and help with things like the pain and stopping people doing what they like to do by developing a non-surgical treatment for Perthes disease. And working with the rest of the people doing this Perthes work, I think that's where my place was better as a physio, to work on the non-surgical side of that and try and see if we can't improve the outcomes for these children. And that's me. That's Perthes disease, and that's why I think we need more research. So thank you again for letting me tell you about my research and what I've got planned.
Thank you, Adam. And questions have already come in. So are you happy to take questions now?
Yes, absolutely.
And I guess the first one is related to the remit of your research. Is it correct to say there is a research predominantly focused for the United Kingdom?
It is at the moment, yes. I'm currently funded by the National Institute for Health Research. That's it's an organisation that's linked to the NHS. So I'm just coming to the end of a 2-year award that was funded to do that, and over the course of my proposed PhD, for the next 4 years, it would be, if I'm successful, that would be to carry out work in the UK. Now, that being said, over the last few years, ultimately the world has finally begin to unite in the sort of the Perthes research world, and the big countries are starting to get behind and come together, because we're now starting to get a good focus on how to develop Perthes research, and that's led by Dan Perry. So it's great to see that people are finally coming together, because we recognise that it's such an important thing to do. So it's good to see that we're finally sort of coming together. So it will be something that's tackled worldwide.
And with regards to who decides whether it's surgery versus physio, this is a question that has come in. What is the approach at this point in the UK?
I'll be cautious with my answer, in that ultimately it's not me that decides. But these children are managed in, and again, I'll be sure to answer based on my experience of working in Leeds. So it does change from centre to centre, but I can certainly tell you that locally it's based on an MDT approach, which is, when I say MDT, that just means the multidisciplinary team. So a lot of people, ultimately consultants from an orthopaedic level, but also it's included with the family. The family are involved in making those decisions, and it's based on a clinical decision, patient to patient. It's not, you have Perthes, we will operate. Similarly, it's not, you have Perthes, we won't operate. We have to do what's right for that child, and every patient gets that. And it's based on a number of different factors, on their personal situation, the literature and the evidence that they feel is important and relevant to that patient. Things like age of diagnosis is really important, because of one of the things that we do know, that the later it's diagnosed, that sometimes the worst position the hip is in, and that often needs intervention from a surgical point of view. So there are a lot of things that are, a lot of variables in the decision making.
Thank you, Adam. Another question that has come in relates to, if a child does have a surgery, would the study cover also those children, or is it just predominant for non-surgical intervention?
Would the what, sorry?
If they end up having surgery,
yeah,
versus non-surgery. Basically, the question is whether, from a physiotherapy point of view, whether there would be a pathways also for those children as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that the hard thing at the moment is that once the children, like the children that have surgery, have a pretty well worked out post-op physio plan. And we kind of know what we're doing a little bit with those a little bit better, because they're a bit more common to us. But we've kind of got to the point where, by that point, we've kind of got to the point where they've had surgery, so we're already there. My hope is that this app is something that takes off, and I'm able to work on the research for it, and that it really works, and it takes off, and then it's available for everyone, because there wouldn't ever be anything in the app that would only be of use for people who didn't have surgery. Because if you think about what the non-surgical treatment was likely to be, it's about creating the best environment for that hip joint. So we're keeping the muscles around the hip joint nice and long, but also nice and strong, so that we've got good movement in and around the hip. Whether you've had surgery or not, that's good advice for you or I. That's good advice for everybody. So it would definitely be something that would be suitable for both surgical and non-surgical patients, definitely.
And an interesting question that has come in, and I don't know whether you're able to answer it, but why is it predominantly there are more children diagnosed in the north of England? with Perthes?
Yeah, I will quite, I'll do it because we're on video. I'll hold my hands up and say I don't know. Because I know one of my supervisors, I know he's spoken to STEPS previously, Professor Perry, he's done quite a good amount of research to show the difference in where those Perthes diagnoses come. I'm not sure why that is the case, but what we do know is that it most certainly is the case. Quite recently, he said to me that Liverpool has the highest number of Perthes cases in the world.
Indeed.
But it's fascinating that is the case.
Indeed, Liverpool has, but there's a question obviously to understand. I don't think at this point in time we do have worldwide statistics, and it would be also interesting to look at those statistics worldwide. But you know, hopefully we're going to get to that point in 2 or 3 years' time.
Yeah, definitely. With more research, we'll have more answers.
Exactly.
There are a number of theories for why that might be the case.
And I have two questions that have come in. The last two that I'm going to ask you to answer. So one relates to exercises, and I guess what could be deemed too much exercise when we talk about Perthes, and how much pain is acceptable?
Again, that's a question that's certainly more patient specific. There would be multiple factors to think about on what pain is specific, like what pain is too much, would be more thinking about why the pain's happening, what type of pain, when is it happening. For those who are familiar with Professor Dan Perry, with Dan's examples of the ice cream cone, is a really nice way of talking about it. If we're thinking of an ice cream on top of a cone that's just come out of the freezer, lovely, nice and set, and then thinking of a normal hip, that head of the hip bone, as that starts to melt, becomes really squashable. And then with high impact activities like football, rugby, trampolining, hopping, skipping, that kind of thing, puts a lot of pressure through the hip joint and can cause that to become quite squashed and further damage to the bone. But that's the decision on what is too much and how to change those activities. That's measured and adapted patient to patient. So I can tell you of a couple of Perthes patients that I've treated that have been able to do differing levels of activity, and that's been a decision made between the physio, myself, the consultant surgeon, the clinical nurse specialist, the patient ultimately, and about managing a whole range of things. And so it's not the easiest of questions to answer, but I think it's definitely something that you can always be willing to ask your local carers, the physio that you're under, the surgeon that you might be talking to, because those sorts of things should be discussed regularly.
Thank you, Adam. And the last question is related to the timeframes of your project. What are the timeframes for your project? Yeah,
so the proposal of the PhD is over 4 years. That's mostly because of the length of the PhD, because during that time I'll still be working clinically. And so what's really important is that as much as I want to do the research, I need to make sure that my clinical skills don't drop. So that will take the PhD project over 4 years. The first year of it will be where I'll do some of the questioning and talking to the family, the parents, the patients and the parents of children with Perthes disease, and getting their insight into what the app should look like and what the treatment pathways should look like. And that'll take a little bit of time to logistically sort out. So getting interviews done, setting up things, it will most probably look like things like Zoom calls, which will be great to get insight. That just means that I can open it up to it almost everywhere and to have insight from them. And then from there, I'll write those sorts of things up and present that back. And then from then I move into phase 2, which will take probably between years 2 and 3, developing the app, working with the app team to design something that that we think will work. So that'll be about within the next sort of 2 or 3 years that'll be ready to go for testing. And then in the 4th year, we'll do the testing and we'll be able to hopefully present good results to say that the app works. at which point we put it to a much bigger trial and get it out to much more people.
Thank you, Adam. And I guess you're looking for parents also to get involved and getting feedback here. So
yeah, absolutely. So that's a big thing. That's a big thing that will take place over the whole 4 years, and has done so in the last 2 years of this award. Is that there'll be regular meetings every few months with groups of families who, you know, with Perthes disease, and advisory groups, to be able to make sure that I'm not just creating an app that I like and creating a treatment pathway that I like, that it has to be something that's kind of, you know, by the people, for the people. It has to be something that works, but it also has to be something that's important to them, because that will then mean that we get more people involved and engaging with physio and doing it, and then getting the benefit of it.
Indeed, Adam. Thank you very much for your time. And for anyone else that would like to send questions to Adam, you can do so by sending them to info@steps-charity.org.uk. And if you would like to be involved with STEPS and Adam's research and reviewing maybe our Parents Guide and supporting us with the development of new fact sheets and Parents Guide that can be distributed all around the UK and actually all around the world, please do get in contact with us. Thank you very much, Adam, for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.